Chapter 9. The Mirror's End. Friday morning began with a timid sun and humid, cold, and thick air. Trees in the park shone with dewdrops. It was as if an army of fireflies were hidden among the bare branches. Jim Morrell sneezed and blew his nose. "I don't understand why it has to be me specifically." "Because Professor Hertz asked you to," Jeremy replied. The boy observed the sports teacher and sneered to himself. Jim was a robust man who was far younger than the rest of the teaching staff, to the point that the students almost considered him as one of them and referred to him by first name. He had crew-cut hair and always wore a ridiculous adhesive bandage on his cheek that, in his opinion, gave him a tough guy look. And on that day, he also had a red nose due to the chill. Okay, he insisted. "But why did your parents have to come here on precisely this day, and all together as well? And why are Alida, you and your little group of friends not in class like everyone else? Hertz explained the situation to you, didn't she?" "Yes," Jim admitted. "But to tell the truth, I didn't really understand much of it." Jeremy gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder, and they both arrived at Caddock's Gate, where the kids' parents were waiting for them. Takeo and Akiko Ishiyama, Yumi's father and mother, who live in an area nearby, came on foot. Odd's parents, Robert and Marguerite, quickly joined them. The Ishiyamas and Robert had the same lost, confused expression on their faces. It was because of the man with two dogs, who Walter Stern had called Grigory Nictopoulos. According to Hertz, this despicable man had used the memory snatching machine on them. Jeremy looked all around him until he spotted who he was looking for. He was there, a little further away from the others and seated on the edge of the footpath just the other side of the gate. His father, Michael Belpois. He was a tall and skinny man with blonde hair, which was becoming sparser around his ears, and disappearing completely on the top of his head. He was dressed in a tweed suit like that of an English teacher from a previous decade, and round glasses identical to his son's sat upon his nose. "Dad!" Jeremy cried as he ran towards him. "How are you?" "Good. Your mother told me to send you a kiss and an enormous hug. But are you up to something? Why aren't you in class?" "Ahem." Jeremy cleared his throat, giving him a surprised look. "What did Professor Hertz tell you?" "That I needed to come here as soon as possible," he responded before gesturing to the rest of the parents with his head. "And I see that I'm not the only one." During this time, Jim had approached them, trying to be kind. The Ishiyamas and Robert de la Robia's faces hadn't changed expression after hearing his jokes, while Odd's mother even seemed upset. Jeremy decided to take matters into his own hands. "Come on," he explained. "Professor Hertz is waiting for you. We'll have time to talk later." The darn factory didn't even have running water. Throughout his life, Mego hadn't really been a very privileged person. He came from a very poor family, and to be able to survive, he had needed to enlist in the army as soon as he came of age. But this place was truly intolerable. In comparison, some military bases in Eastern Europe seemed like five-star hotels. "Excuse me, sir, may we enter?" Memory's voice asked from outside the tent. The man finished washing his face with water from the dish and glanced in the mirror. His hair had been well combed, and his golden canine teeth gave him a wolf-like appearance, or vampire-like. Come in," he said after fixing his purple hat in his head. Memory and Grigory Nictopoulos obeyed. "Well?" Mego asked them as he sat down comfortably on the cushions. "Any news?" For the moment, we've sent 22 of our best soldiers to Lyoko," Memory began to explain. None of them have managed to take even a single step, except for one." Mego raised an eyebrow, suddenly interested, and Memory continued. "He's Soldier James Fairland, sir. Just after materialization on Lyoko, he began to run as fast as he could, terrified. Getting him out of the virtual world was quite a feat. I'm afraid that he may never recover." "In other words, nothing, a total failure," Mego said, his mouth twisted in a dissatisfied expression. "Yes, sir. As I've already told you, it's not possible for adults to enter Lyoko." "But some people have succeeded, sir," Grigory interrupted. He had an intense look in his eyes, one that was dark and lifeless like a predator. "Like those brats, for example, and one adult, Professor Hopper." "Are you sure?" "I revised all my recordings and the data from the file. Apparently, Hopper went to Lyoko with his daughter, Alida, and he never came back." "Great. Fantastic," Mego commented sarcastically. "Hopper is a peculiar person," Memory added. "After all, he is the creator of Lyoko, and, what's more, we have no idea what effects virtualization had on him." Hannibal Mego slammed his fist into the coffee table beside him, and his rings jingled menacingly. "So, in short, Our only way to enter Lyoko is to resort to using a peculiar person. Or a child, is that it? He groused, then turned towards Memory with an inquisitive look. You, my friend, you are undoubtedly very special. The woman didn't even flinch, and Mago smiled. Excellent. Memory's loyalty was absolute. At least the money he gave Walter Stern for the memory snatching machine had been a good investment. If you'd allow me, sir, I wouldn't recommend that, Grigory intervened, shaking his head. Memory's the only one who knows how to operate the supercomputer. If what happened to the rest of our soldiers happens to her as well, we won't stand a chance. That's true, he admitted with a look of disappointment. On the other hand, Grigory continued, the children are dispensable. I'm thinking of Jeremy Belpois, for example, the boss of the little gang. He would be perfect. It wouldn't be difficult to convince him to work with us. Grigory could have really ingenious ideas sometimes. So be it, said Mago, rising to his feet. Bring me this Jeremy. Yes, sir, I will go tonight. Jeremy waited alone in front of Professor Hertz's office. The recuperation procedure had been carried out without any problems, and Yumi and Odd's parents had regained their memory before going to the dormitory with the rest of the kids. They had much to discuss. But Jeremy had preferred not to go with them. At this very moment, Hertz was using the memory snatching machine on his father. The boy had helped the teacher install the apparatus that very morning. It was a simple pair of leather gloves with metallic sensors on the fingertips that were connected to an LCD monitor on the back, along with a potentiometer, the device that allowed the user to control the machine's intensity. The potentiometer was also connected via Bluetooth to a large computer that analyzed the person's brain and recorded their memories, or gave them back, like what was happening now. The office door then opened, and Professor Hertz exited into the hallway, accompanying Michael Belpois, who was holding her arm. How do you feel, Dad? How do you feel, Dad? Jeremy gushed, jumping to his feet. I have a bit of a headache. The professor helped the man to sit in the chair Jeremy was just occupying. It'll pass, his son assured him. Michael nodded silently and raised a hand to caress his head. I always knew you had so much worth, but now that I have my memories back, Suzanne, that is, Professor Hertz, brought me up to date. You really proved yourself like a real champion. Jeremy coughed, blushing, and gleamed his glasses on his shirt so nobody would notice he was close to blubbering. You've also been great, Dad, he murmured. The professor told me that you were one of the people who invented the scanners. Yes, the scanners. It seems strange to me now to not have thought about it for all these years. They disappeared from my mind. They were completely erased. But now I remember everything. Michael looked at his son and winked. And it's more than about time to get back to work. The both of us, isn't it? Yumi and Odd were in the living room of the Hermitage. Aelita was lying on the couch and seemed ill. She was drenched in sweat, seemed exhausted, and had a wet cloth on her forehead. Hopper was working by her side with a laptop on his knees. Aelita! Odd exclaimed. So we're not completely alone! Yumi looked at him and gave a sad smile. Unfortunately, it's not what it seems. In this world, Aelita is just a recording. Look closely. She looks human, not elven like she usually does on Lyoko. Yumi took the control box and looked at the small screen. 1st of June, 1994. They had arrived on the final day for Aelita and her father before their long voyage within Lyoko. The girl would not come out of the supercomputer for several years, and Hopper never would. In a way, it was the last day of their lives. Aelita turned the cloth over on her forehead. Her cheeks were colored an intense red that matched her flamboyant hair. How are you feeling? Her father asked her. I have a really bad headache, she murmured. That's because of the memory snatching machine, Hopper said, turning his gaze away from the laptop and smiling at her. I've never used it in the opposite way before. You'll see, it'll wear off soon. The memory snatching machine, Odd whispered, but Yumi gestured for him to be quiet. Maybe they would find out about it later. And the secret room? Aelita asked, seeming concerned. Is everything ready? Yes, Hopper assured her. I did everything like we said. The Brûlé brothers built the walls that hide the first room as well as the second one. It's very unlikely that anyone will become aware of their existence. Can I tell you something? I'm afraid of forgetting everything. Since you used the machine, I felt very strange, as if parts of my memory are dying to leave me. I'm scared. Hopper held her tenderly. Don't worry. I left a video in the room, and you have my notebook in the attic. I drew a map in invisible ink inside it, showing you how to enter. That way, you can always find the secret room again, if need be. A video? So you also think that... You think that I could forget everything? His daughter asked, visibly worried. Hopper looked away from her. Yumi immediately noticed the dark shadow of concern that overtook his gaze. So it was true. Hopper really had done something to Aelita, something that caused her memory loss. So that was how she'd forgotten everything, from the secret room to the fact that she knew Yumi and the others' parents very well. The young girl could now explain the sad tone of voice the professor had in the video in the secret room. He knew perfectly well that when Aelita saw it, she would be a completely different person, without the slightest memory of any of this. "I promise that everything will be okay," Hopper whispered. "I'm sure of it." At that moment, someone knocked loudly at the front door. "Professor, we know you're in there," someone shouted from outside. "Come out with your hands in the air and don't try to resist." Yumi instinctively stood up and ran to look through the living room window. Standing on the Hermitage's front porch were 3 men completely dressed in black, suits, ties, sunglasses, and with guns in hand. "They're the same ones that chased me and Ulrich around Brussels," Yumi cried, raising her hands to her mouth. "So things are about to get ugly," Odd announced. "Look, Hopper knows it too." The professor had stood up and was trembling. His eyes started all around him, looking lost, and then he ran into the kitchen. When he came out a moment later, he was holding a pistol in his hands. Aelita scrutinized it, eyes wide. "Daddy, what are you going to do?" "Suzanne left it in case we ran into any problems," Hopper replied to his daughter, forcing a smile. "But don't worry, I have no intention of using it." Yumi and Odd shared a worried glance. "Professor, come out of the house with your hands up. Don't make us come in there." Hopper gripped the pistol and pointed it towards the door. "I'm armed," he screamed. "If you enter, I'll fire. Get out of here!" Yumi squatted out of instinct, causing Odd to do the same. "He's terrified," she whispered. "Things could get out of hand." The men in black began to shout again from behind the door. Hopper seized Aelita's hand, trying to get her up from the couch, but the girl was too weak. She remained seated, breathless, and her head fell back against the back of the seat in a chaotic cascade of red hair. "This is your final warning, Professor," the men in black cried. "Let us in." Hopper looked around him, not really knowing what to do or where to go. His forehead and hair were beaded with large drops of sweat. Then the sound of glass shattering broke the silence. A black-covered elbow had broken part of the glass in the window, sending a transparent rain onto the floor. A hand then stuck itself into the room. It was wearing a dark glove and holding a gun. Yumi couldn't move. It was such a crazy scene, so different from her normal life, that the girl couldn't believe that it had actually happened. The professor let out a cry, aghast, and the weapon almost slipped out of his hand. There was a gunshot. Hopper dropped the smoking weapon, horrified. "He shot! Return fire!" The weapon in the window began to shoot. A thin blaze drew a line straight between the shadows, and a fraction of a second later, Yumi heard Aelita's cry. The girl whipped around and suddenly felt like she was moving in slow motion. Her friend's hair was whipped as if disturbed by a light breeze, and a trail of blood began to drip down her forehead. They shot her," Odd murmured, stammering. "They shot Aelita." Hopper stifled a cry of despair upon seeing his daughter collapse on the floor. He ran to her and took her in his arms. He then dashed out of the room, running as fast as he could. Yumi and Odd hurried to follow Hopper through the main hallway and down the stairs to the underground. Behind them, the men in black broke down the door. "You just need to hang on for a few more minutes, my dear. Then we'll be safe," Hopper whispered to his daughter. The professor ignored the cold room and continued to the metal door leading to the secret passage to the factory. They'll find us," Aelita said to her father. "Don't worry," he said with a fragile smile. "It's not easy to find the right way down here. And once on Lyoko, your body will be dematerialized, and this head wound will be healed like magic. Trust me." Yumi and Odd followed them inside the passage and finally entered the sewers. "What happened to Aelita?" Odd asked anxiously. "We don't have to worry about that," Yumi smiled. "In the present, she's still alive and in perfect health, right? That means that she survived, that Hopper managed to virtualize her onto Lyoko in time." After finishing her reasoning, the girl reflected for a moment and continued. "On the other hand, there is something that worries me. We're following Hopper, and he's already sealed the secret room and is ready to escape to Lyoko forever." "Yes, and?" "And if these are his memories, how can we see them? The recording in the mirror should have finished at least 2 days ago. There's something strange about all this." Odd shrugged. You said that we're in a sand machine thingy inside the supercomputer at the factory, right?" "Sandbox," Yumi nodded. "Yes, Jeremy called it that." "So maybe Hopper recorded his memories directly into the supercomputer." Ulrich let out a mocking laugh and slapped Jeremy's shoulder. You know what, he said. "Now I know where you get it from." "Meaning?" He and his father were side by side, the same glasses, a twisted shape on their noses, and with the same grease stains on their clothes. "Nothing, man, nothing." Ulrich avoided giving the response, laughing again quietly. Eva and Richard then arrived, holding a platter of glasses and a jar of lemonade. The teen told them in a satisfied voice that the repairs on the mechanical arm were almost finished. According to Mr. Ishiyama, they would finish it at around 6 in the afternoon. Jeremy and his father sat down on the small sofa in the secret room in the Hermitage, facing the old television in which Hopper left his video for Aelita. The boy looked at his watch. It was 2:30. It seemed incredible that Odd's father and Yumi's parents had sped up the repairs so much. They must have rebuilt their old friendship while at work. "The only problem is that, with the motherboard melted," he murmured, "we need to build another one. That could take us months, and we need to ask for help from a specialized workshop." He thought again about Odd and Yumi, imprisoned in the mirror. He hoped with all his heart that nothing had happened to them in the meantime. By his side, his father finished his drink. "Don't be pessimistic," he told him in an encouraging tone. "The fuses save the most delicate parts of the system. But the motherboard? I'm the one who designed it, along with Hopper. To save parts, we used a normal circuit board with some small adjustments. So all we need to do is take a computer apart, and that's it." "Will this do?" Richard said, taking out his Palm computer. "Out of the question," Jeremy blurted, shaking his head with a smile. "The Hopix codes are on that. But if I remember correctly, Odd has a laptop under his bed that he never uses. I doubt he'll be angry if we use it to save his life." Richard and Eva leapt up, offering to look for it at Caddick. Michael gave them a nod. "Takeo Ishiyama would have my head if I don't bring his daughter back safe and sound before dinner. Family's sacred to him. He told me that many times in the old factory, years ago," he commented, laughing. Hopper waded through the ankle-deep, black and nasty-smelling water in the sewers. With some difficulty, he managed to climb a wall, gripping a series of iron handles encrusted in the reinforced concrete. Yumi and Odd followed closely behind him and came out on the bridge to the old factory. They realized that, at that moment, it didn't seem so old. The road was already blocked, there were warning signs everywhere, and the bridge hadn't yet rusted. Hopper entered the factory and descended to the lower floor using a comfortable metal staircase. "This is different to having to swing down on ropes like we have to do," Odd cried. "Yeah, in 10 years this place had really fallen to bits," Yumi confirmed. The two teens shuffled into the elevator with Hopper and Aelita. Their friend's head was tilted back and her eyes were closed, her breathing ragged. Her blood still flowed, running down her cheeks as she mumbled incomprehensible sentences in a low voice. Hopper went straight down to the second underground floor, where the scanners were, and gently left Aelita on the floor. He then kissed her forehead. "I'm sorry, my dear," he said, rummaging in his coat pockets and taking out a memory card. "I record my last memories and put them all in my virtual journal. After that, you and I will cross the threshold into Lyoko. You'll see, we'll begin a new life there, far away from the men in black and the Green Phoenix." The scene the kids were seeing before their eyes began to slow down, and they felt their chests tighten. This was the professor's final goodbye to Earth. They followed him to the third underground floor, which held the supercomputer. They observed him pick up a strange machine from the floor, consisting of a pair of leather gloves with a screen on the back. Hopper inserted the memory card into the gloves, put them on, and rested his fingertips against his forehead, and then he disappeared. It was very sudden. 1 minute the professor was there in front of them, as if in real life, and the next he was no longer there. The supercomputer room was empty. "What happened?" Yumi cried. "Hey!" Odd interrupted. "That thing uses memory cards identical to the one my mother found when my father was attacked." "Yeah, Hopper must be the one who built it, a machine that collects memories. But the card contained my father's memories. Aelita's mother appeared on it. How could my father know her?" They both remained silent, overwhelmed. They then took the elevator together to the scanner room. It was empty, lifeless. Aelita was no longer there, nor was Professor Hopper. Yumi sat on the floor and began to reflect on everything. "The machine we saw records memories. If that's so, then it seems obvious that Hopper could only insert the memories up until that moment into his journal. So, does that mean the journal stops there?" Yumi nodded. "The professor recorded his memory, and then put it in the sandbox for Aelita to find. He then returned here and went to Lyoko with her. That must be how it happened, more or less." "How disappointing," Odd sighed. "It's like watching a movie and finding out that they cut out the last few minutes." "But Aelita was already in bad shape before she was shot," Yumi thought. "Hopper must have done something to her. Something that affected her memories. And then he brought her to Lyoko and shut the supercomputer down, and they remained trapped there for several years." Yumi took the mirror control box and looked at the screen. A new message had appeared on it, but they hadn't gone back to reality yet. What could that mean? Too much time has passed. Jeremy and the others must have run into a serious problem. She and Odd can only count on each other. "Look," Odd suddenly murmured. The doors to the room became brighter, an intense yellow color, and the 3 scanner columns in a triangle formation in the center of the room began to vibrate. "Someone's materializing here. Maybe it's Professor Hopper coming back. Or maybe it's Ulrich coming to help us," Yumi exclaimed, filled with hope. The vibrations increased in volume The vibrations increased in volume before stopping all of a sudden. Then there was a sharp crack. The doors of one of the scanner columns opened, sliding to the side. Inside was a young man a little taller than Yumi, with slightly long hair and a strange smile on his face. "He looks a bit like your friend, William Dunbar," Odd whispered. The boy's smile widened. "Ah, but I am not William. I am Xana."